Hello and welcome to Cooking with Miss Michelle. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of my very favorite things, pickles. So for this project you'll need some pickling salt, and you can find this at most grocery stores near the salt. You want to make sure to use pickling salt because it doesn't have any extra additives or anti-caking agents that will make your pickles weird. 3.5 pounds of pickling cucumbers, some dill flowers, or if you can't find dill flowers, you can always use dill seed instead. Some garlic and mustard seed, some black peppercorns, sugar and white vinegar, and we're also going to add some water. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do this. The preparation is the same, but if you would like to preserve your pickles, you can use mason jars and fresh lids, and you can preserve them so they'll stay good on the shelf for a year to a year and a half without being opened. If you don't want to go through the work of canning, you can always just reuse any jars and make refrigerator pickles. They'll still last quite a while in the refrigerator. But if you like to make a lot of pickles like me, then you'll want to can them. So for canning, I like to add this pickle crisp. It keeps the pickles nice and crunchy, otherwise they get kind of soggy. And this is kind of hard to find. I've seen it at Fred Meyer recently, and they usually carry it at Ace Hardware. You can always order it online too. And then if you like to add a little bit of spice to your pickles, you can use jalapeno. That is the recipe for basic pickles. You can also experiment with other spices like bay leaves. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of star anise or cinnamon sticks. You can also do allspice berries. There's all different ways that you can make them, so you can experiment, but I'll just show you the basic recipe. So the first thing you want to do is wash your pickles, and you want to make sure to scrub them really well, because when you're canning you want to make sure you get no bacteria in your jars. So I'm just going to keep them in this bowl and wash them under cold water and give them a good scrub with my fingers to get any dirt or any germs that might be on the outside of these off. Okay, so I have all my cucumbers washed, and with this recipe, for 3.5 pounds of cucumbers, I can either make 3 quart-sized jars or 6 pint-sized jars. I'm gonna do the quart size, and I like to have 1 extra smaller jar just in case I have a little bit extra, but this should give me the perfect amount. So before I get my cucumbers ready, I like to put all the other ingredients in the jars, so that way I can just top them off with the cucumbers. So I'm going to start by putting a 1/4 teaspoon, a heaping 1/4 teaspoon of the pickle crisp into each jar. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of mustard seed. And a 1/2 teaspoon of my black peppercorns. And then I'm going to put one of these big dill flowers in each jar. If I was using the dill seed, I would put about a tablespoon into each big jar, or a 1/2 tablespoon into the pint jars. And these flowers are nice because they look really pretty in the jar when you have them like all canned with your pickles inside. They just look really nice. And I have an extra one, so I'm just gonna add it into here. These flowers, a lot of times you can find them at farmers markets, as well as the cucumbers. You can find me at the Red Barn Farmers Market on Wednesdays from 3 to 7. There's also a really good farmers market in Redmond on Saturdays from 10 to 2. And actually one of our alumni's dad runs that market, and if you remember Miss Lily, she's usually there too. I know there's also farmers markets in Issaquah, Carnation, North Bend, so they're pretty easy to find, and if you get really nice fresh ingredients, your food will taste a lot better, and it's nice to support local farmers too. So the last thing I'm gonna add before I start getting my pickles ready is some garlic. And sometimes garlic is a little bit hard to peel. I'm just gonna break this up and get rid of these papery skins. And I like to put a couple cloves in each jar. You can put more if you like a lot of garlic, or less if you don't like as much. Or you can skip it if you really don't like garlic. So to get the skins off, if I press down with a spoon and crush it a little bit, it makes it pretty easy to peel. And of course, some garlic is easier to peel than others. So if you find some good, nice, easy to peel garlic, I would stock up on it because it's kind of hard to come by. But it makes cooking a lot easier if your garlic is easy to peel. And also, if you crush it like this, it helps to release the flavor, so it gets nice and juicy, so it'll soak into your pickles. Okay, so I have all my garlic in. I know I said that would be the last thing, but I'm actually gonna add a couple jalapeno slices. If I just add a little bit, it won't make it super spicy. So if I want them to be spicy, I'm gonna wanna add a lot of jalapeno. When you cut jalapenos, you have to be really careful. You don't wanna touch the cut part of the pepper because it can actually burn your skin. So I just like to hold it by the stem and just carefully cut slices. You can also wear gloves to give some extra protection, but if you're just doing one for pickles, it's not too dangerous. And then you can just use the knife to carefully pick them up and put them in the jars. So I'm just gonna add about 3 slices to each jar. And then in one of my jars, I'm just gonna add some of my extra spices. So I'm gonna put a cinnamon stick and a bay leaf. Oh, that one's really big. And some of these star anise. And these also look really cool, so it'll make my jar extra pretty. Okay, so now I'm ready to prepare my cucumbers. So some of these are nice and small, so I can just put these in the jar whole. But before I do that, I want to cut off about 1/8 of an inch on the blossom side. So there's 2 sides. There's the stem side where it gets picked from the plant, and then the blossom side where it starts off as a flower and then grows into a cucumber. Some of them are really easy to tell because there's actually a little bit of the dead blossom still stuck on there. And some of them have a little bit of the stems still stuck on there. But if they don't have anything, the stem side usually looks bigger. It has like a bigger spot on it. And the blossom side is smaller, and it's usually kind of a brownish color. So you can tell which side is the blossom side. And the reason I want to cut a little bit off is because it has an enzyme that makes your pickles get soggy or soft, not as crunchy when they're in the jar. So I just want to cut off a little bit at the end, and then I can start putting them in my jars. And like I said, these smaller ones can just go in the jar whole. I have some really big ones. So there's a couple different things I can do, and this also just depends on what kind of pickles you like. I like to cut them into spears. So I usually just cut them in half and then put the flat side down so they won't roll around. And then I can make 2 more cuts. And that'll give you a nice spear to eat. Another thing I can do is cut them into sandwich slices. So if you like them on sandwiches or burgers, these will fit really nicely onto your bread or your bun. You get a nice flat pickle. So you can put these on. And then the last way that you can cut it, unless you think of something else, is just to make little pickle chips. So you can just slice it up and put them in your jar that way. And sometimes I also like to do this if my jar is almost full and I just have a little bit of room at the top. I can make the pickle chips to just top off my jar so I don't waste any space. And if you like them all 3 ways, you could just put different kinds of slices in each jar so you have a little bit of a variety when you're eating them. And you can usually fit, you want them to be like not too tight, but you can pack them in there so they fill up a lot of your jar space. And sometimes you have to shake them around so you can get them to fit, and sometimes they're curvy and harder to fit in there, so it's actually kind of fun to try to fit your pickles in. And then you want to leave a 1/2 inch of space at the top. So if you fill it to about this rim and just leave the top part empty, then that should give you enough space. Okay, so before I get the brine ready for my pickles, if I am going to be doing some canning, there's a couple more things I'm going to need. A funnel, so I can help pour my liquid. This will be good if you're canning or not. That way I can pour my liquid into the jars without spilling it. And then this tool is really nice. It helps you make sure you have the right amount of space at the top of your jar, which is called the head space. So if you want 1/4 inch, you go to the first step. If you want a 1/2 inch, which is what we need, you go to the second step. And then it has 3/4 and 1 inch. And then the other side helps you go around the edge to make sure there's no air trapped in your jar before you can it. You'll also need some fresh canning lids. You can't reuse these. Once you use them one time, they won't make a proper seal, so you have to use fresh lids every time. And then a jar lifter to help you lift your jars in and out of your canning pot. And then you'll need a canning pot that will fit your jars. And you want to make sure you have at least 1 inch of water above the top of your jars for a proper seal. So I'm just going to turn this on to get it started, because this much water will take a long time to boil. And then I can start getting my brine ready. So for regular dill pickles, which is what we're making, I need 4 cups of water. And then I'm going to do 3 cups of white vinegar. And 1/3 cup of my pickling salt. And then I'm going to do 1/2 cup of regular white sugar. And I usually just get the organic huge bags from Costco, so I just have it in this jar. And then I want to take this over to the stove. And I'm going to heat it up. I want to heat it up until it starts to boil. And I'm going to stir it to make sure all my sugar and salt dissolves. Okay, so I have my brine boiling and you can see all the salt and sugar is dissolved. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. Now I'm going to pour it into my jars, and I like to put a towel down while I work, so if I spill anything it won't get on my counter, and then this will also protect it when I take them out of the canner. It'll give it a little bit of a cushion so I won't have my really hot jars just directly on the counter. You can also use a wire rack. So I'm just going to put my funnel in, and I'm going to carefully pour my brine over my cucumbers. And you might notice they actually change color a little bit. When the vinegar hits them, they get a little bit of a, I don't know, it's kind of a weird green color. So they will actually shrink up a little bit too, and then puff back out. So it's really interesting making pickles. Not only are they delicious, but it's kind of a science cooking project too. Okay, so after I poured my liquid in, I'm going to take my tool here and I'm going to go around the edge and just try to make sure there's no air trapped in there. And I want to try to make sure these stay under the liquid, but sometimes they float, so I can't always do that. So just do the best you can, and if a little bit is sticking out, it's okay as long as you still have your ½ inch of space at the top of your jar. Okay, so now, if I'm making refrigerator pickles, I can just let these cool down a little bit and put the lids on and put them in the fridge. But I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to can them. So I want to make sure I have a ½ inch of space at the top, no more, no less. So it looks like I need just a little bit more liquid in here. And I can tell it's a ½ inch right when the edge of my tool touches the top of the liquid. And I'll probably have a tiny bit of this brine left when I'm finished. If for some reason you run out of brine and you just need a tiny bit of liquid to make it exactly a ½ inch, you can use either just water or vinegar. And then once I have them perfectly filled, I'm going to take a wet towel and I just want to wipe the edge of my jar rim to make sure there's no food or anything stuck on there, so my lid will make a proper seal when I put it on. And I'm going to make sure my lid is centered. And then I'm going to put the band on and tighten it so it's just tight. I don't want to over tighten it, but I want this to hold my lids on while it's in the boiling water bath. And then I'm going to open up my giant canner. And I'm going to very carefully move my jars with my jar lifter into the canner. So I like to start off, I have this rack in here, so I kind of balance them when I put them in. I put one in and then I put the other one across from it. And usually I make like a double recipe, so I'll have more jars, but I'm going to put my jars in, and then if my water's not boiling yet, after you pour the vinegar in, you can put the jars on the rack so they'll stay hot. You don't want to let your vinegar cool down and then put them in, because the temperature change could crack the jars. So this is just about boiling. I'm going to lower this in, and I'm going to use some pot holders because this is pretty hot. And I'm just going to carefully lower these in. Now, I need to boil my jars for 15 minutes. And like I said, I want to make sure the water is at least an inch above the top of my jars. So if you lost some liquid boiling, you can add a little bit more. And I don't want to start the timer until my water starts to boil again. So if I put the lid on, it'll help it boil faster. But because the pickles cooled down the liquid a little bit, it stopped boiling. So it shouldn't take long to reach boiling again. But once it starts to bubble, I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. And then when my timer rings, I'll come back and take these out. Okay, so my timer just went off. It's been 15 minutes. So I'm ready to take my jars out. So I'm going to use my jar lifter. And I'm just going to carefully lift them out and put them on my towel. And I want to keep them there undisturbed for 24 hours. So my lid's going to make a nice seal. And then after 24 hours, I'll come back and check them. I want to push down. These are from yesterday. So if I push down, I just want it to feel firm. If I push down and it's not sealed, this one's not sealed. So what I can do is just put this in the fridge and eat it right away. If I want to, I could try to reprocess it, but usually most of them will seal, so it's easier to just take your one jar and put it in the fridge. You're supposed to let the pickles sit for at least 2 weeks before you eat them to let the flavors meld really well, but if you can't wait, it's okay. They'll still taste really good. So when they do cool a little bit, you should be able to hear the lid pop down. Sometimes it takes a little minute or two, but it's pretty exciting when you hear that sound when you're canning. So there's the pop of the jar. It's an exciting sound, so you know your jars are sealing. So I'm just gonna let these sit for 24 hours, come back and check them. And if they're sealed, I can actually take the band off because this jar is sealed. The lid is sealed on here. So they can be stored like this, and they can be outside of the refrigerator for 1.5 years with the sure-tight lids. So what I like to do is say, you know, write dill pickles or whatever you make, and then say best by, and then 1.5 years from today, write the date. Some people like to write the date that they made it, but I like to do it the other way because then you know when to eat it by. And after you open the jar, then you'll need to store anything you don't use in the refrigerator. But you can make your pickles, and thanks for watching my video. I hope you like it, and happy pickling.